In April 2014, the militant terrorist group in Nigeria, known as Boko Haram, kidnapped nearly 300 girls, which sparked one of the biggest global social media campaigns to bring back the abducted girls. This led the world to become familiar with the deadly terrorist organization, which have killed more than 13,000 people in Nigeria. And while the country has a history with many different violent militant groups, none has been as violent and brutal as Boko Haram. Yet despite the massive focus by many media outlets on the group, there has seldom been an explanation as to why the group exists in the first place. Focusing more on their deadly attacks and their main goal of replacing Nigeria's secular government with an Islamic state based upon Sharia law. At least, this is how it has been portrayed in the Western mainstream media. This video essay will therefore try to explain the underlying socio-economic root causes as to why Boko Haram exists, and why they have been successful in their recruiting of the youth. This will be done by examining the conclusions and analysis the two scholars Lucky Asuleme and David Ojochenemi reach in their book The Root Causes of Terrorism, where their main thesis is that Boko Haram has garnered support throughout mostly northern Nigeria because of their outcry against the horrendously bad socio-economic status of these regions. Therefore, the two scholars claim that the sect's appeal and emergence in northern Nigeria should not only be attributed to their radical interpretation of Islam, but also the poor socio-economic conditions in the country, which the sect has promised to improve by overthrowing the secular government with an Islamic state. Although the existence and success of Boko Haram is due to more than just socio-economic factors, such as ethnic, cultural, religious, ideological, and historical reasons as to why there has been a violent Islamic insurgence in Nigeria. This video essay will mainly focus on the socio-economic causes. The reason for this is because many previous studies have shown that there are in fact certain correlations between the underlying social, economic, political, and demographic conditions and terrorist activity. Before Nigeria became a predominantly oil-dependent economy in the 1970s, the country was an agricultural-based economy. Agriculture accounted for 85% of the nation's total export. Furthermore, Nigeria was also the second leading producer of coca in the world, as well as a major exporter of rubber, hides, and cotton. The agricultural sector not only provided employment for over 75% of the population, but also funded various national development projects. This all changed in the 1970s, when Nigeria began relying more on the export of their huge oil reserves. This was the start of drawing out the country's labor from the agricultural sector into the then booming oil sector. The consequences of this massive attention given to the oil sector has meant that the agricultural shares in the non-oil GDP has decreased dramatically. In the 1960s, it averaged 60%, but has since declined to 30% between 1978 and 1981. Nigeria's overdependence on oil has become the backbone of Nigerian economy. All other sectors of the national economy have been neglected, which have resulted in huge rises in unemployment and poverty rates across the country. Nigeria's over-reliance on oil and the various governments' purposeful neglect on other sectors in the economy has meant that the country has been hit with the so-called resource curse, which is a term that was coined by the British economist Richard Rorty in a 1993 book investigating why resource-rich countries underperformed other developing countries. The resource curse occurs as a country begins to focus all of its energies on a single industry, such as mining, and neglects other major sectors. The same curse has inflicted Nigeria, which is shown by the 2012 poverty survey by the NBS, which showcased that 69% of Nigerians are defined as being poor, despite Nigeria being Africa's biggest oil producer, having a daily production reaching about 1.9 million barrels. The systematic corruption in Nigeria also plays a major part in the country's problems of underdevelopment and rising poverty rates in the society. Between 1999 and 2004, Nigeria was consistently ranked among the 3 most corrupt countries in the world in the Corruption Perception Index of Transparency International. In the book Thieves of State, the journalist Sarah Chase chronicles how the residents in the northwestern city Kano are subjected to police corruption.
So besides that anecdote and that sense of revenge that he felt, let the IED go off, let police officers be killed, what other evidence is there that leads to extremism?
Right. So there you get the story of the opportunity, and just to kind of underline opportunity, let me give you another anecdote example. Northern Nigeria, I think this was 2013 or 14, I'm sitting around with a number of justice sector professionals. And I'm just asking about the mechanisms of corruption. Like, where are the toll booths? And at some point, a prosecutor, a guy, breaks in and says, Sarah, you know, we've only been talking about money. It's not just money. I say, oh. And he tells me the story about the lady whose husband was diabetic, and he was held in pre-trial detention. And she went to the judge to say, release my husband, please, on bail. It's a bailable offense. I guarantee I'll deliver him. You know, he's a sickly man. He's not going to run away. The judge took advantage of her.
This is the environment in which Boko Haram first launched its attacks on the police in 2009. Even among Nigerians who disapprove of the group's aims, the violence elicits a degree of approval. But the corruption doesn't only reach the police force in Nigeria. There also exists a high degree of corruption at the top governance level, especially regarding transparency on how and where exactly all of the country's oil revenues are spent and allocated. In January 2014, Nigerian Finance Minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala announced that nearly $11 billion earned from the sale of crude oil between January 2012 and July 2013 was missing from the Federation account. Nigeria's central bank governor, Lamido Sanusi, estimated that the figure was closer to $20 billion. And when he began to investigate the private banks that he had suspected of laundering the money, he was fired. Corruption in Nigeria has further exacerbated the political instability in the country, where seeking government positions is seen as a place to secure future income and business opportunities for personal gain. This has resulted in political campaigns where politicians use every means at their disposal, including intimidation of ordinary civilians to vote for a particular candidate or committing voter fraud. This has had the negative effect that politicians are now more focused on securing their hold of their government positions by spending generously on the military and other institutions of state coercion, to the detriment of the education, healthcare, and other important sectors critical to economic growth and the general welfare of the people. Oil wealth has created a small but immensely wealthy elite in a country where poverty is on the rise. By some estimates, 9/10 of the economic benefits from oil production go to 1% of the population. Since 2001, Nigeria has managed to have robust economic growth, but the positive growth rates haven't benefited the Nigerian population at large. The United Nations Human Development Report from 2006, which is the official indicator for extreme poverty, revealed that 72% of Nigerians live on less than $1 per day. The socio-economic issues are also a much bigger problem in the northern regions of Nigeria, where Boko Haram has many strongholds. For example, the rate of unemployment in the northern region is worse than the rest of the country. Northern states such as Adamawa, Jobe, Borno, and Gombe are affected the worst, as the graph illustrates. Part of the high unemployment rates is due to the fact that the agricultural sector contains about 70% of the country's labor force, but only contributes about 30% of the country's GDP. The shift from being an agricultural economy to solely being an oil exporting economy was considerably harsher for the northern states. For example, 11 out of the 13 cotton-producing states are in the far north. This had the terrible effect that there are now about 70 million unemployed Nigerians who roam the streets every day searching for jobs. And as Lucky Esulame and David Ojochenemi rightly point out, unemployed and underemployed young adults can rapidly destabilize a society with their restless energy and are quick to join nationalistic movements or are easy targets for radical religious movements. Similar to the case of unemployment, poverty in the northern regions is also higher than in the other regions of the country. As the graph will show, the absolute and relative poverty rates in the northern states are considerably higher than the southern regions. The research director of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Shopa Williams-Elegbe, lends support to the view that when one mixes the higher rate of unemployment, high illiteracy, and poverty in the north with radical Islam, which promises a better life for martyrs, it becomes very understandable why the region is a breeding ground for terrorism. Even though religion has played a vital role in the evolution of Boko Haram, many scholars agree that this is merely a smokescreen for achieving socio-economic justice. Therefore, scholars Lucky Esuleme and David Ojochenemi both suggest in their book that addressing the socio-economic root causes in Nigeria is essential to resolve the conflict in the country. Hence, it is vital for the Nigerian government to create employment opportunities, which the two scholars suggest can be done by reviving the textile and agricultural sectors, especially in the northern regions. Furthermore, they suggest that the government needs to devote more effort into improving the general welfare of the citizens, which needs a good dose of investment in new healthcare facilities. Additionally, Esuleme and Ojochenemi recommend that the government needs to do more in investing in an ideological battle against Boko Haram, which is to be done by improving the education standard, especially in the northern regions. All of these measures are of course not easy to implement, but if the schools can provide the population of the north with skills that will be useful to them in order to gain employment, the youth would have more opportunities in life. And in this way, as Esuleme and Ojochenemi point out, the youth will become less gullible to the sways of the political and religious leaders and resist being used as agents of political and religious violence.